Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings. Now let's get straight into it. So today we're going to continue on our journey of understanding the split of the kingdom of Israel, who the quote unquote Gentiles are. And as this is a refresher, this is a more broad lesson because some of the concepts that you really need to go even deeper into to understand the split of the kingdom, therefore understanding who the Gentiles are of the New Testament, you have to take quite a bit more time to dive into these different concepts and the different accounts in the scripture so you understand what you're looking at. However, this is a more broad view. So if you need to explain this to someone in like 30 minutes to an hour, or you're just trying to give them kind of the broad view of who the Gentiles are in the quote unquote New Testament, this lesson will help you do that. If you don't already have the scriptures ready, or you just want to see a way to understand how to put it, or you're someone that's new to this, it could be someone new. You know, you never heard of these things before at all. You've never heard of the Gentiles being Israelites, the Gentiles being mentioned by the Apostle Paul. You think that salvation is for all nations. This is for you too, of course. But that's why we're going on this journey here, and we've gotten around halfway there. Even though we have a ton of scriptures to still cover, I did a lot of the broad overview in the first part, though. So in this one, I'll more be reading the scriptures and kind of bringing home the things that we covered already on part one. So you definitely want to stay locked in on this part two as well, so we can get through all the information. Now, one of the last verses that we got to on the on part one was Hosea chapter 8, that talked about how because of the idolatry, Ephraim, aka Israel, aka the northern kingdom, would be cut off. All right, because they've hired lovers, aka they have committed idolatry with gods, foreign gods, or any god that's not the Most High is idolatry. Okay, and that's exactly what they did. Okay, like verse 11, because Ephraim have made many altars to sin, altars shall be unto him to sin. Okay, they made offerings. All right. They sacrifice flesh, verse 13, for the sacrifices of mine offerings, and eat it, but the Lord accepted them not. Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins. They shall return to Egypt. Okay. For Israel hath forgotten his maker and buildeth temples, and Judah have multiplied fenced cities, but I will send a fire upon his cities, and it shall devour the palaces thereof. So they were building altars to these different gods, all right, and making sacrifices. However, that's going into a whole nother point. The point is that Ephraim, aka the northern kingdom, they committed a vast amount of sins against the Most High, and because of that, and because we are His people, and we will be punished for our iniquities. Because of that, we get the sharpest and the worst punishments from the Most High for our disobedience. You understand? Now, let's get 2nd Esdras chapter 1. This is also an account here that is vital to understanding, all right, because it goes into everything else in the Bible. I feel like I've said that quite a few times, but it is what it is. Hey, it's just true. Let's get verse 24 here. It says, what shall I do unto thee, O Jacob? And if you aren't familiar, by the way, 2nd Esdras, Esdras is Ezra of the Bible. Okay, this is in what's called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha is a part of the main continuity of the Bible, but it was removed in around the 19th century by the Protestant church. For what? Because what they saw to be quote unquote canon or not canon, even though this has always been a part of the Bible, at least all the way up until that time. It always was a part of the Bible. So this should be a part of just your standard KJV Bible, but it was removed. But if it was all those, decades and hundreds of, centuries before this, then we should not, not deal with it just because one sector of the Protestant church believe that not to be the case. But anyways, just in case you didn't know, because someone may be watching this video and may be new and they hear edges, where is that at? You just have to have a 1611 version of the KJV or the King James Version Bible. Okay, so verse 24. What shall I do unto thee, O Jacob? Thou, Judah, wouldest not obey me. I will turn me to other nations, and unto those will I give my name, that they may keep my statutes. Oh, where it says the other nations, I will turn to thee. Who was the Most High referring to? Let's keep reading. Seeing ye have forsaken me, I will forsake you also. When ye desire me to be gracious unto you, I shall have no mercy upon you. Whensoever you shall call upon me, I will not fear you. For ye have defiled your hands with blood, and your feet are swift to commit manslaughter. Ye have not as it were forsaken me, but your own selves, saith the Lord. Thus saith the Almighty Lord, have I not prayed you as a father his sons, as a mother her daughters, and a nurse her young babes? Let's read down just a little bit, because although everything we were reading there was good, just for the sake of time, let's go skip down to verse 30 really quickly. I gather you together as a hen, if you remember that, being in the Gospels, as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings. But now, what shall I do unto you? I will cast you out from my face. We read about that. Verse 31, when you offer unto me, I will turn my face from you. For your solemn feast days, your new moon, and your circumcisions have I forsaken. I send unto you my servants the prophets, whom ye have taken and slain, and torn their bodies in pieces, whose blood I will require of your hands, saith the Lord. So if you didn't know, a lot of the prophets of not just of the books of the Bible that we read about, like, again, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Haggai, Micah, Malachi, so on and so forth. A lot of these men were killed in cold blood because they didn't like what they heard from the prophecies. But not only that, there were other prophets that the Most High sent that they may or may not have a book in the Bible. They also were slain too as well. So that's how wicked we were. And just imagine that. They are speaking the words of the Most High. So it's almost like you're saying, man, forget what the Most High is saying. All right, you have to really think of that. And that's why these sins were so grievous. All right, because they were only speaking what the Most High told them to speak. But they thought that they could get rid of the prophecy or, get rid of exactly what was being said just by killing the prophet, even though, again, it's already too late. If the Most High is speaking it to you, it's already done. So killing a prophet would do nothing, but that's how wicked our people had gotten. Okay. Verse 34, and your children shall not be fruitful. Remember that word, for they have despised my commandment and done a thing that is evil before me. Your houses will I give to a people that shall come. Who are these people? Is this referring to the other nations? Let's read. Which not having heard of me, yet shall believe me, to whom I have showed no signs, yet they shall do that I have commanded them. They have seen no prophets, yet they shall call their sins to remembrance and acknowledge them. I take to witness the grace of the people to come, whose little ones rejoice in gladness, and though they have not seen me with bodily eyes, yet in spirit they believe the thing that I say. And now, brother, behold what glory, and see the people that cometh from the east, and to whom I will give for leaders, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. It says Oseas, this is referring to Hosea, Amos, Micaias, which is referring to Micah, Joel, it says Abdias, that's referring to Obadiah, and Jonas, that's referring to Jonah. Verse 40, Nahum, it says Habakkuk, but that's referring to Habakkuk, the prophet. This reads Sophonias, but that's referring to Zephaniah. This says Agaius, but that's referring to Haggai. Zechariah or Zechariah. This is Malachi, which is called also an angel of the Lord. You see, the Most High was referring to the prophets that he would bring to the people. But either way, who are these people that the Most High was referring to? It's referring to the exact same people that were split off from the kingdom. He's not bringing in just a whole new separate people that have not been mentioned ever before. Okay, let's grab some real quick that I actually didn't even have pulled up. Let's get Hosea chapter 1, starting at verse 9, even though the rest of the context, if you read from the top, it'll kind of give you a better understanding. But just for the sake of time, verse 9, then said God, call his name Lo-Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. Verse 10, yet the number of the children of Israel, keep that in mind, shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. That's part of the prophecy that we just read in First Esdras. Okay. That is the people that was being mentioned, the children of Israel that will be told that they are not a people. But in the same place, it will be said to them that they are the sons of the living God. Why? Because verse 11, then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together and appoint themselves one head. Who is that? Christ. And they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. All right, the coming of Christ. So out of all of this time, this is what we're building up to. So we understand that you had all 12 tribes together. Okay. And way before you even had the 12 tribes being established, okay, you had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob receiving the promises of the kingdom, the promises of fruitfulness, okay, the promises of a company of nations. And then you had all 12 tribes being established, and then you had those 12 tribes being split, and then you had 10 of those 12 tribes not only being split, but also you had these people being cast away and being told that they are not my people, like we just read. But then what happens after that? Those people will be gathered together and will be appointed one head, which is Christ. So all 12 tribes will come back together. You understand? That's what the Bible is about. That's who the Gentiles are. That's the one doctrine, the whole understanding that you need to know, or at least that's who all Israel is. And that's what the Bible is referring to, where it talks about the Gentiles more times than not in the quote unquote New Testament. You get it? It's about the northern and the southern kingdom coming together. And there's so many different allegories, so many different parabolic ways of mentioning this in the scriptures. Yahushua did it. Okay. Or Christ did it. Paul did it, like the olive tree. Okay. Which is like the almond tree mentioned in, mentioned in Genesis, the 35th chapter, where Luz means almond tree, or like King Solomon did in Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter. Okay. The flourishing of the almond tree, the olive tree, the almond tree is all referring to the people of Israel. All right. And in particular, the grafted in branches, that's referring to all the same people. Okay. The Most High didn't just start dealing with other nations randomly, and he never did. All right. He had already chosen the children of Israel. Okay. He had already chosen one people from the beginning. You can read about that in Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, really all throughout the Bible. When we read in Genesis chapter 35, all right, or Genesis, the 12th chapter, that was already being established that the Most High had chosen one people. Okay. So that's his elect. That's who he's dealing with. He has one people. And again, well, we just read that here in verse 10 too as well in the book of Hosea, this first chapter right here. Okay. So they are his people. They're the sons of the living God. Those 10 tribes are going to come together. All right. And that's what Paul constantly was trying to tell the southern kingdom. A lot of times when we read about the different books of the Bible, they are epistles or letters written to either the northern or the southern kingdom to try to get them to understand who each other were. All right. And that they were the same people. You get me? Is this making sense? Hopefully it is. All right. So just to get more on the northern kingdom being cast away before we kind of bring everything home together, let's get 2nd Ezra chapter 13, start at verse 45. Actually, let's read up a little bit to so we get a better context here. Let's start at verse 39. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude, remember that word, multitude, fruitful. That's going to make sense a little bit later on. That he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land. We went over that already. In the time of Hosea the king, when Salmanazar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. They never went back into Israel. They were carried out of the land. The 10 tribes, aka Israel, aka Ephraim, aka the northern kingdom, were carried out of their own land of Israel, which was formerly the land of Canaan. Either way, the land of Israel, they were carried out of their own land, okay, where they never returned until the latter days. Verse 41, but they took this counsel amongst themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So this is going into something else, which I really don't want to go into right now, to kind of keep it, keep the lesson on track. But either way, we saw that those 10 tribes, they were cast away. They were cast out of the land. They went into Assyria, and then they went into other lands too as well. This happened in the 8th century. Do you understand? I mean, by the time of Christ, this is like 800 years later. So do you, if you didn't understand that before, do you get it now? Hundreds of years have went by. These people have, they have 10 generations now, 7 to 10 generations in another land. That's why it took so much explanation from the Apostle Paul and from the disciples who were apostles too as well, of how we should accept these people. Like, do you see that? Does that make sense? I mean, that's why you had these people, which I'm going to speak about here shortly, being identified as Spartans and as even later on Celtic people or the Gauls. These were all Israelites for the most part. I mean, some of the other nations were mixed in, obviously, but for the most part, these are things that Israelites identified as within or throughout history. Okay. And remember, this was a curse as well. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth, even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. Okay. Even verse 65, and among these nations shall thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. That's referring to the Israelites that were scattered amongst all nations and worshiping other gods. Like it says, You shall serve other gods, even wood and stone. Christianity and Islam, okay, you know, they got this stone that they worship. Wood, like the Christian cross, okay. Those are some of the main doctrines that our people worship. That's in the latter times, but also, you know, before we even got into that time, we were worshiping other gods, wood and stone, not the true, only true living God that there is, which is the Most High. Okay, the God of Israel, as he calls himself. Ezekiel chapter 22 and verse 15, and I will scatter thee among the heathen and disperse thee in the countries, and will consume thy filthiness out of thee. Again, since our people, we were scattered among the heathen, we were dispersed in all of these different countries. All right, we identified as like a Roman, like Paul identified as a Roman. All right, these people identified as Gauls, as Celts, as even Assyrians, whoever, as Babylonians, because they were from there. When I say from there, meaning physically, they were from there. Okay, another verse, Ezekiel 12 and 15, because this the people of Israel being scattered, everybody pretty much knows that, right? Most people pretty much understand that Israel was scattered. However, most people just think that they are the quote unquote Jewish people today, and they're not. So verse 15, and they shall know that I am the Lord when I shall scatter them among the nations and disperse them in the countries. So remember, you had the people together, they split, they were in the land, but they were split, and then they got scattered amongst the people. Once they left into Assyria, they scattered all over the place. Okay, and they were not accepted as being a people. They were not a people. Like James 1 and 1, James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, or the Lord Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Greeting. The 12 tribes were scattered. Okay. First Peter 1 and 1, Peter, an apostle of HaMashiach Yahweh Shai, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. When it says the strangers scattered, Paul, and we know this by verse 2, elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father through sanctification of the Spirit unto obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Hamashiach. Grace unto you and peace be multiplied. The strangers here is referring to the Israelites that were in these different lands in Greece. Okay, Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, even in Asia Minor, which is modern day Turkey, Bithynia, all these different places, man. So where am I getting at? Let's go back. Galatians chapter 3. Now that we have gotten some more context, let's see my whole point of telling you how many of our people were scattered and why that matters to understanding the scriptures. Galatians chapter 3, verse 8 again. In the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith. They were called heathens. They were called Gentiles. They were called all these different names of the countries that they were in, meaning the Israelites, especially the northern kingdom, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, in thee shall all nations be blessed. All the nations, because all of our people were scattered within all the nations. But this does not mean literally all the people within all nations. And that's why I didn't read that way. The Bible is still only dealing with one people. Okay. You get it? Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. To also add to this, let's get Acts chapter 2 and verse 5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. Jerusalem, Jews, devout men, meaning they were keeping the statute, laws, and commandments, out of every nation under heaven. When you read all nations, it doesn't mean literally all the people, meaning all of the other nations, all of the individuals that are not of the seed line of Israel. More times than not, it depends on the context, of course, not every single time, but more of the times not. When you read about salvation, when you read about the Most High choosing a people or things of that nature, it's only referring to one people. Okay. Even if it says all nations, like how Christ told the disciples to preach the gospel to all nations, he wasn't referring to all individuals because most of the people of the other nations, they are known pagans, meaning that they willingly worship the other gods. It's not like it's a taboo thing. They willingly worship the other gods, and they will not be convinced any otherwise. Okay, the gods of the nations are idols. So the Most High, through his son and through the disciples and through his prophets, are not trying to, in this current time, trying to convince the other nations to do any otherwise, because it's already known. That's why it's in the scriptures. The gods of the nations are idols. Where it says all nations, like in Galatians chapter 3, it's referring to that company of nations that brought forth out of Jacob, the company of nations, okay, the multitude, all right, of the tribe of Joseph, aka the tribe of Ephraim, aka Israel, aka the northern kingdom. All right, that's what this is referring to. See, it's all coming together because it's all just one doctrine. It's all just one people, the same people that were prophesied before being brought back into the fold. That's it. That's it. Like if you see on this map here, Israelites were all over these places. You see all these different countries. So when you see all nations, it makes sense because we literally were scattered all over the known world at this time. Okay. So over here, it's so-called Africa here, and Egypt and Nubia and the Nile, so-called Palestine here. This is where the land actually is, at least like right here. And then in Syria, okay, Babylon, Media, in Greece over here, in Rome. I mean, we were in all of these different places, in these islands too as well. All right, the Peloponnese. Israelites were scattered literally all over the known world. And that's why James said that in James 1:1, to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Okay, so where it says all nations, that doesn't mean literally all of the individuals within all of the nations, because you cannot convince these people to flee idolatry. You can only convince a people that were ever instructed to flee idolatry or to worship one God. You can only convince those people to worship the Most High, not people that were never given license to worship the Most High in the first place. Okay, but let's see what was prophesied to happen. All right, let's now talk about the northern kingdom of all these people that were scattered coming back into the fold, being brought back and being just one nation, meaning being the 12 tribes coming together, what the scriptures call the kingdom of David. Okay, let's get Zechariah, and let's get verse 8, chapter 10. And I will strengthen the house of Judah and will save the house of Joseph, aka Ephraim, aka Israel, aka the northern kingdom. And I will bring them again. You can't be brought again somewhere unless you were brought the first place. Again means an additional time, an additional occurrence, right? And I will bring them again to place them, for I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I had not cast them off. They got cast off, but the Most High said they will be as they were not cast off. That's what we read about in the quote unquote New Testament. For I am the Lord their God and will hear them. Verse 7, and they of Ephraim shall be like a mighty man, and their heart shall rejoice as through wine. Yea, their children shall see it and be glad. Their heart shall rejoice in the Lord. Ephraim, it shall be as a mighty man when they were cast away, but the Most High will have mercy upon those that he cast away, his northern kingdom. Okay, that's one of the promises, man. That's the good news. That's the gospel. Is that the northern kingdom now has been accepted back into the fold. So it's not just the southern kingdom, all of his people. That's why Paul said all Israel shall be saved. He was talking about all 12 tribes. Okay. But you have to, he's not giving this out for free. You have to keep his statute, laws, and commandments, okay, in sincerity and in truth, not just in the physical, but in the spiritual to be accepted. Okay, and that's also why Paul said all Israel is not Israel, because if you are of the seed line, but you don't keep the statute, laws, and commandments, you are counted as a Gentile of the other nations. Okay, but that's what the prophecy is, that all nations, aka all of the 12 tribes, will come back together. That company of that multitude of nations that we read about in Genesis chapter 35. Okay, let's get that one more time. Genesis chapter 35, verse 11. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. Remember those words. If you recall, I've said that quite a few times, but we're going to get that in a second. A nation and a company of nations. That's Ephraim. Okay, that's Israel. That's the northern kingdom. That's that company of nations that were split and cast away. Shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. We know that kings did come out of the loins of Israel, aka Jacob. All right, so that nation and a company of nations is what the scriptures is dealing with for the most part in the so-called New Testament. And by the way, if you are not familiar, the only reason that I keep saying so-called New Testament or quote unquote New Testament or Old Testament is because those are really man-made terms. You do have an old and a new covenant, but the actual split was made by men. Okay, the split between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And testament really just means covenant. Okay, those words are interchangeable. So it's not that if you say New Testament, you're going off, or it's like a sin to say that or nothing like that. But just know that there is no real, when I say real, meaning according to the Most High and according to his instructions directly, there is no split. There is just the Bible. There's just the prophets and the prophecies and the scriptures are all just one. And when you understand that too, you don't view the Bible as this great split in between doctrines. It's like we think New Testament, oh, new means new. It's went away, and old just means, oh, it's done away with. All right. When in reality, the quote unquote New Testament, most people see it as, say, if you had a vehicle and it's aged, it's you've had it for 10, 15 years, you got over 150,000 or 200,000 miles on it. Most people view the quote unquote New Testament as a replacement, like you replace that car. But really what happened is that you got that car a tune up, you got that car a new engine, you gutted everything out and replaced it and made it new, but it's still the same vehicle. That's what an analogy for the quote unquote New Testament is. It was not a replacement, it was an improvement upon what was already there, but the foundation is still the same. Or like in house or something, it's like renovating a house. All fresh new paint. You put in new appliances, paint on the outside, paint on the inside. You remodeled everything. That is what the New Testament represents, not a replacement, not buying a new house, but improving upon the foundation that you had. Because without the foundation of the old covenant, you cannot have the new covenant. So it's necessary. However, it's still the same thing. So it's the same message all throughout the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It's the same message. And when you understand that, everything starts to make sense. Then you can put the scriptures together instead of trying to combat them together. When you read the Old Testament, if you're viewing it as, oh, this is just old, this is done away with, then you're not going to you're not going to put everything together. You're not going to have respect upon the Most High's words. Like, for example, even though most of the most of the law, meaning the Levitical priesthood or the sacrificial laws that are in the law, even though that we don't perform those sacrifices, when I'm reading about the sacrifices, I still have respect upon them because Brother Paul told us that this was not a sin. All right. In Galatians 3, he told us that it was not a sin. It's not going off, that we had a sacrificial law because it was necessary. Okay. It was necessary at the time. So even when I'm reading about things that we no longer do, like the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices, I still have a certain reverence to it because I know that had to be instilled within our people. And it was a necessary part of our history. Okay. So when you're reading the quote unquote Old Testament, you can't view it like, oh, that's just old. That's just Most High changed, God changed, and Jesus this and that, So that's just, a quick rant on that. Now let's go to Ezekiel chapter 37. It says, reunion of Judah and Israel. Let's go to verse 15. The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, verse 16, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions, and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. You see, you remember with Abijah the prophet, the Shilonite, how he had the garment that he rent into 12 different pieces. This is a similitude here as well that the Most High had Ezekiel do, where he took the one stick and wrote upon it Judah, and then the other stick, and then combined them together into one stick. So that was just a way to represent, an actual prophecy that will be fulfilled within our people of Israel. Okay. You see, so something happened on the physical, the sticks is just representative of an actual much deeper prophecy that will happen within the people. Okay. Verse 18, and when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, will thou not show us what thou meanest by these? Verse 19, say unto them, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph. So you take the stick of Joseph, which is the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his fellows, meaning the northern kingdom. We talked about this 10 tribes incessantly here. And will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. Verse 20, and the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before thy eyes. Verse 21, and say unto them, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen. That's why you have to preach into all nations, because we are among the heathen. We are among all nations, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side and bring them into their own land. Verse 22, and I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, a multitude of nations. These are the families of the earth mentioned in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. This is the company of nations being mentioned in Genesis chapter 35, verse 11. You get it? And they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all. Okay. Like I said, the Davidic kingdom, that's the one kingdom overall. 37 verse 24, and David, my servant, shall be king over them. This is actually referring to Christ, because Christ, aka Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, he is the seed of David. Okay. Everything you read in the Bible cannot be taken at face value. Okay. You have to understand what it's actually referring to. And they all shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. The Davidic kingdom, that's the everlasting kingdom, is the kingdom of David, because David ruled at least the vast majority of his 40 years of rulership. 33 years of that was with all 12 tribes together. You understand? So that's why it's the Davidic kingdom, or at least it's called here the Davidic kingdom, because all 12 tribes are prophesied to come back together. And that's what we read about in the quote unquote New Testament. Okay, it's very simple. They shall be no more two nations, or be divided into two kingdoms. Okay. Now, I've been saying a lot. Let's remember the words multitude. Let's remember the words fruitful. Let's get why I've been saying that so much. Okay, let's get, and by the way, remember, if you watch part one, you know that I said I'm mainly focusing on, I focus some on history and things of that nature, but my main focus on this lesson is to go over how the prophecies align to the Bible. So that's why we're going in the book of Genesis, to understand where everything that's mentioned in the New Testament as far as the Gentiles, and my claim that the Gentiles are in reference to the northern kingdom. We're going into the prophecies that were mentioned in the quote unquote Old Testament, even in the book of Genesis, the first book, to get those said prophecies so that we understand what the Bible is actually referring to. So let's get one of those prophecies now. Genesis chapter 48, verse 17. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, you'd have to read the whole chapter to get more context, by the way, but either way, let's keep going. It displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head and to Manasseh's head. So if you understand that Joseph, which is one of the sons of Israel, aka Jacob, his two sons, meaning Joseph's two sons, were Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh was the elder, meaning the oldest of the two brothers, but the blessing, or at least the main blessing, went upon Ephraim. Okay, even though that he was not the firstborn. All right, verse 18. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. Verse 19. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son. So Jacob already knew that. So he was putting his blessings, his right hand. Do I need to explain all that? Let me just stick to the point here. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son. I know it. He also shall become a people, meaning Ephraim, and he shall also be great. And truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. So actually this is referring to Manasseh. He shall be great too. But now when it says, but truly his younger brother, Jacob is referring to Ephraim. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. And his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Ephraim shall become a multitude of nations, not just one nation. That's why we see the verbiage that we see, like in Genesis, the 12th chapter. Okay. Or like we see in Galatians, the 3rd chapter. Okay. And in these shall all nations be blessed. That's all nations that came from Jacob, all nations that came from Israel, the multitude of nations, the company of nations. You understand? So let's get what the word here, multitude. Let's get that word here. I believe that's the next thing I have pulled up. Let's get multitude here and let's see what it says. All right, when I said get it here, I mean in the concordance, which is an explanation of the original Hebrew or Greek, or sometimes other languages like the Aramaic. what that word meant and the explanation of that word if you're not familiar with what a concordance is. So H4393 for multitude. See what it says. It says here, fullness, that which fills, fullness, handful, mass, multitude. That's the word that's used, the fullness. All right, let's see why that's relevant. Because Ephraim was prophesied to become a multitude of nations, or a fullness of nations. Let's see where else that was being used at. Or, and by the way, too, Ephraim means double ash heap, but more commonly, Ephraim means I shall be doubly fruitful. Remember, I say, remember the words fruitful and multitude that we now see is also being associated with the word fullness, fruitful, fullness. Okay. Let's see why I've been saying that so much. Let's get the book of Romans. Romans chapter 11, which is very telling to who the Gentiles are. If you understand the context of the entire Bible, when you read Romans 11, there will be no more debate about who the Gentiles are that Paul was referencing in most of his epistles and in the book of Acts. Okay, like in the book of Acts, like chapter 15 and everything, where Paul talked about how the gospel will be given into the Gentiles. There'll be no more debate of who those Gentiles, who Paul was talking about when he was talking about those Gentiles. When you read and understand Romans 11, it makes it very clear. Really, Romans 9 through 11 is very clear cut once you know what you're looking at. But let's get it. It says Romans chapter 11, verse 1. I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. You see, Paul is saying, I'm an Israelite. I'm not cast away. We not cast away. I too am an Israelite. He got to remind the people, I'm an Israelite too, y'all. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to the outcasts of Israel within the Romans, or excuse me, within Rome, who they call themselves Romans. I'm an Israelite too. Verse 2, God hath not cast away his people which he foreknew. What ye not what the scripture saith of Elias, how he maketh intercession to God against Israel, saying, basically what Paul is saying here, we're going to skip down for the sake of time. He's saying that there's always going to be a remnant. There's always going to be a group of Israel that's going to be saved, meaning that's going to keep the statute, laws, and commandments that he's going to put to the side. Even when things look bleak, there are going to be a selection of our people that are going to understand who they are and are going to keep the works thereof. Okay, but let's keep going. Let's get verse 13 real quick. Matter of fact, no, let's get verse 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. But rather through their fall, who is their fall? The southern kingdom. And how did they fall? The southern kingdom fell by not accepting Christ when he came, and also, of course, advocating for his death. That was the fall of the southern kingdom. That's who Paul is referring to here. And that's where he talks about, again, like in Acts chapter 15, right? Where, what's that, around even like the third verse, I believe, it talks about the conversion of the Gentiles, and how the Gentiles will receive the gospel. That's why. And it's because the southern kingdom, because of their iniquities, now is flipping. The southern kingdom, they were the ones that remembered the Most High the most because they were in the lands, even though you had like Pharisees, that was at least, a semblance of a people of the Israelites that were still keeping the statute, laws, and commandments and not forgot who their God was, like the northern kingdom did. But when Christ came on the scene and we did not accept him, we meaning our people, did not accept him. The southern kingdom did not accept him, at least, for the most part, they didn't. That was the fall of the southern kingdom. You get it? So first, it was all on the northern kingdom and them, being in idolatry and not understanding. And then it fell on the southern kingdom. And when the southern kingdom, they didn't accept Christ and they advocated for his death, then you had the northern kingdom coming back into the fold. And that was the order of how that went down. Okay. The things that I mentioned, hey, is in the scriptures. You have to search and find it yourself, because we can't cover all of that into one lesson. This will be like a 10-part lesson or something. Okay. But verse 11 again, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. But rather through their fall, salvation is come into the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. The northern kingdom came in after the fall of the southern kingdom, and they were referred to as Gentiles because, they were not a people considered by the Most High. He said so himself. They would not be a people. They had fallen off, but the southern kingdom were jealous. Okay. They were provoked into jealousy. Verse 12. Now, if the fall of them be the riches of the world and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? Remember the word fullness? And you remember Ephraim, the multitude of nations, and then we looked it up. It was the fullness. That's what a multitude meant. Let's bring it all home. Verse 20. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off, meaning the southern kingdom, because of their unbelief in the Hamashiach. And thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. Actually, let's, for the sake of time, for the sake of time, matter of fact, I'll at least do verse 24. For if thou wert cut off of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, that's what we were talking about earlier, the grafting in. Grafting is essentially what we read about, like in Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, where you have the one stick of Judah and the one stick of Ephraim being combined into one stick. So it's like you have a branch that falls off a tree that's being added back into the branch. That's what grafting is, essentially, adding that branch back. So you had the northern kingdom fall off of the proverbial tree. All right. And now they're being added back. All right. You get it? How much more shall these, which be natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? Verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery. See? A mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Verse 26. And so all Israel shall be saved. If this is referring to the Gentiles, meaning the other nations, and the fullness of the Gentiles is referring to the fullness or the coming in of all the other nations, then why did the next thing that Paul wrote here was that all Israel shall be saved? He's referring to all 12 tribes. That's the fullness, aka the multitude. Remember, that's what the word fullness is associated with. That's one of the words, the multitude, just like we read about with Ephraim. He was given that promise that he would have a multitude of nations. Paul, there was no New Testament at the time that Paul was writing this. He's going by the prophecies of the quote unquote Old Testament. You see, it all goes in together. And that's why he said all Israel shall be saved. All 12 tribes. That's what he means by all Israel. All Israel is not literal for every single Israelite will be saved. The all is referring to all 12 tribes, not every single individual. So when you read a word like all nations, you have to understand that that doesn't mean all the people within the nations. That's not that literal from the standpoint of literally every single individual. Because that would mean it. Well, you have to understand that meant what people act like it means. That would mean that all nations equals every single person in existence. And we know that's obviously not the case, because you have the lake of fire, you have the destruction of the wicked. So it can't be all people, right? So that kind of destroys that right there when you realize that all Israel doesn't mean literally every single Israelite. It means all 12 tribes, just like all nations, like we read about in Galatians chapter 3, when it says all nations shall be blessed. It's referring to all of those, the company of nations, the multitude of nations, the fullness, all right, the multitude, those being saved or being blessed, those people, okay? All families of the earth, referring to all of the multitude of the nations. You see, it all goes in together. That's what it's referring to, man. That's it. Let me finish out 26 because I never did. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Okay. So all Israel shall be saved. That's the fullness of the Gentiles that it was said to come in. And if we look here, it's that same word being used that we keep seeing in reference to each other. Fullness. The fullness is the multitude. Okay. The abundance. All right. The fullness coming in. That's literally Ephraim. This is a prophecy about Ephraim. Okay. Because the northern kingdom made up. I've said it enough. All right. One more time, just to make this last connection. Genesis 48:19. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, Manasseh. But truly his younger brother, Ephraim, shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. That's the fullness. That's the multitude of nations that Paul is referring to, until the fullness of those people come in, the northern kingdom come in. Okay. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. Ye know that ye were Gentiles. You were Gentiles. So the Corinthians were Gentiles until the fullness come in, until the multitude of those nations come in and are grafted together into one stick, into one people under the Davidic kingdom. You get it? Carried away into these dumb idols, even as ye were led. And that's why, by the way, like if you read about the woman in the well in John chapter 4, that's why she said that Samaritans have no dealings with Jews. That's why. Which verse is it again? Verse 9. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom. So Ephraim, Israel, northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, that's represented by Samaria here pretty much. For the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. That's why there was such a big issue with Paul speaking not only to the southern kingdom, but to the northern kingdom as well, to get them to accept that they were supposed to keep the statute, laws, and commandments. It's because there was a rift between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, which we haven't read about that rift yet. So let's get there really quickly. Let's get Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in the time past Gentiles. The Ephesians also were told by Paul that you were in times past the Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. So they were referred to as uncircumcised, just like the other nations were too as well. So it's the same thing. You could be of the seed line of Jacob or Israel, aka Israel, I should say. But if you were uncircumcised, aka you were worshiping the other gods, You say AKA here, but you get it. If you were worshiping the other gods and you were keeping the dictates of the ideologies of the other nations, in idolatry or what have you, just not keeping the commandments, which is sin, then you were considered uncircumcised. And that's what the northern kingdom was. Verse 12, that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. Why would Paul say this? If the Gentiles were referring to the other nations, why does it say being aliens, meaning you were cast away, which we saw that in reference to what? The northern kingdom being cast away, right, in Assyria, and then scattered amongst all nations. That's when they became aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Remember Second Esdras, the first chapter? All right, that's the people, okay, that were cast away, that had not heard the prophets. Okay, you have to keep that in mind, that a lot of the people of the northern kingdom, they never even got exposed to the statute, laws, and commandments. Now you have even people, this is something a lot of people don't understand, that you even had Israelites that left Egypt before Moses delivered all the people. So you had other Israelites scattered in other places. That's, not to go too deep into this, but I want to do a separate lessons on the Trojans and how they connect to the Trojans that you read about in Homer's Iliad. All right. And like the movie Troy, those were Israelites, meaning those were so-called black people. But that's a whole nother topic. Either way, you had our people that had never been exposed to the statute, laws, and commandments, because this took place over hundreds of years. So they were never given the statute, laws, and commandments. That's why they were aliens or strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now it's time to bring them back in. You see, just like that promise we read about in Zechariah, the 10th chapter, verse 6. Remember that? And I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them again to place them, for I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I had not cast them off. You see, for I am the Lord their God, and I will hear them. It will be as though I had not cast them off. So now they're not going to be considered Gentiles, aka what we just read, right, in Ephesians chapter 2. How you were Gentiles in the past, like First Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. You know that you were Gentiles. You get it? So that's the whole doctrine of the Bible. And when you see a verse that seems to be contrary to such, you just have to go back to what we understand here, all the evidence that we have here that was presented on part 1 and part 2. And maybe it's just the understanding of whatever verse it is that you don't fully understand, and not that the whole doctrine just changed. Okay. Like in Acts chapter 10, this is one of the verses, or one of the chapters that people cap and claim that all nations now have been brought into the fold, but that's not the case. Like verse 15, it says, and the voice spake unto him again the second time, what God has cleansed, that call not thou common. This is a dream of Peter. If you should have read this before, if you haven't, go ahead and read it so you will understand what's going on here. But the 4-footed beasts of the earth wasn't actually referring to beasts; it was referring to the northern kingdom, how the Most High has cleansed them. Okay, like in Ezekiel chapter 36. Therefore, in verse 22. Therefore say unto the house of Israel, thus saith the Lord God, I do not this for your sakes, O house of Israel, but for mine holy name's sake, which ye have profaned among the heathen, whither ye went. And I will sanctify my great name. So the Most High, by the way, said, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for my name, because I said I was going to do this. I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so I'm going to fulfill on my promise. But it ain't for you and your works. It's for me. Okay, that's what he was saying in verse 22, pretty much. Verse 23, I will sanctify my great name, which was profaned among the heathen, which ye have profaned in the midst of them. And the heathen shall know that I am the Lord, saith the Lord God, when I shall be sanctified in you before their eyes. Verse 24, for I will take you from among the heathen and gather you from out of all countries and will bring you into your own land. Verse 25, then I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols will I cleanse you. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh and will give you an heart of flesh. Okay. So you see here that the Most High said he's going to clean up the northern kingdom. He's going to clean up Israel. He's going to clean his people, okay, from their filthiness, meaning their sins, and cleanse them from their idols. Sprinkle clean water upon you, which is symbolic for the statute, laws, and commandments, for righteousness. That's the clean water. That also was, going into John chapter 4, which we just got not too long ago. That's what the water represents. Okay, it represents righteousness, the pure water, the statute, laws, and commandments. Okay, but either way, and then opposite, filthiness represents sin. But this is the Most High that said he was going to do this for his people. And this is what Acts chapter 10 is really going into. Okay. So we go back up here really quickly. Like when Peter said, verse 14, but Peter said, not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Unclean here is where it talks about the beast. It's symbolic for obviously food, but this was referring to the 4-footed beast. All right, like in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, the beasts are likened to the sons of men. All right, that's normally referring to either the other nations, or you could be a son of man, you could be an Israelite, but you could not keep the statute, laws, and commandments. So beasts are like in Daniel, the 7th chapter and the 8th chapter, the beasts are normally referring to the other nations, right? But this was all symbolic for the Israelites of the northern kingdom that were acting like Gentiles, and Gentiles in times past are being called common or unclean by Peter, but the Most High saying that I have cleansed them, which we just read about in Ezekiel, the 37th chapter. Get it? So lastly, though, just to put this all together too as well, let's get Acts chapter 20, verse 28 in Acts chapter 10. And he said unto them, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come into one of another nation. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. When it says another nation, this is one of the scriptures that the Christian church will try to tell you this is referring to the other nations, right? But no, this is referring to what we just read about in Ezekiel chapter 37. And let's prove this. Let's read it one more time. And he said unto them, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come into one of another nation. It sounds like it's referring to the other nations, but it's not. Let's get another nation here. Let's get the Greek word for another nation. Let's see what it says here. G246, aluphilos. Let's see what this says. It says foreign. Notice there's only one time that this word was used. So when you go into the concordance, it also will tell you, it will tell you how many times this word was used in the different parts it was used in the Bible. But if we notice here that this word aluphilos in the Greek is one of another nation, is only used one time, and it It's very vague here. It says outline of biblical usage. Normally they give you a lot more than this. It's only literally one word. It says foreign. Why is that? Why are they being so vague here? Why haven't they given us more of an explanation? Well, aluphilos is actually a combination of two words, essentially. If you speak Koine Greek, then excuse my butchering of how Greek works, but essentially it's like two words combined here. It says from G243 and from G5443. Okay, let's see what these two words that combine to make aluphilos or another nation. G243 is another or other. That's all that means. Another or other, for the most part, at least. And then, so the first part of that is another or other. But let's see what G5443 means. This word, phule, means tribe. In the New Testament, all the persons descending from one of the 12 sons of the patriarch Jacob, a nation people. So another tribe, which is the northern kingdom. That's what Acts chapter 10 was all about. You see, if you go into the Greek, it'll tell you that. They didn't want to admit that. You see how they were so vague? So when you had to dig just a level deeper just to see what this word meant, all it said was foreign. I believe they didn't like what they found here because it was very clear what Acts chapter 10 was in reference to. So let's read this one more time now that we got the concept, or excuse me, got the context, and on this word used for another nation. So let's read Acts chapter 10, verse 28. And he said unto them, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew. So Jew also is short for Judah, by the way, or the southern kingdom, normally are called Jews, even if they are Benjamites or from the tribe of Benjamin. They'll also be grouped into what a Jew is too as well, or short for Judah. That's all Jew means, Judah, which is one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. So ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew or a man of the southern kingdom to keep company or come into one of another tribe or another nation, aka the southern kingdom. So it's an unlawful thing for an Israelite of one of the southern kingdom tribes, Judah or Benjamin, to keep company or come into one of the other tribes, the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom, Ephraim, the multitude, Israel. Okay, the 10 tribes that were split that we talked about in part 1. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. You see, that's what the whole point of the dream of Peter was. So that Peter could see, oh, it's time for the Gentiles, aka the other nations, the other tribes, the 10 tribes to come in. You see? That's what this was. Okay, I think I brought it all home here. I mean, if we don't get this now, hey, it is what it is. So to reiterate here, Galatians chapter 3, verse 8, when it says all nations shall be blessed, is only referring to all of the 12 tribes, all 12 tribes being brought back, not being called common or unclean, because the Most High has cleansed the other 10 tribes, the northern kingdom. Even though they went hundreds of years into idolatry, they have now been brought back into the fold. Get it? That's what Ezekiel was prophesying about. That's what Paul was referencing in Romans chapter 11. Okay. And that's why, also speaking of Paul, he said here in verse 4 in Romans chapter 9, who the Israelites to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises. That's only for the Israelites. Okay. Verse 4 is really enough in Romans chapter 9 is really enough to throw away any other contrary doctrine that all nations or this or that, they can be saved. Paul was talking about the Gentiles and the other nations coming into the fold. That all could really be eliminated here, but of course we have to get more context in that. But that is pretty much it. I went as broad, but as in much detail as I could into the prophecies as possible. A lot of the concepts in the accounts and the history that I went over, it would require further examination to get the full context. However, I did the best that I could in the time that I had allowed. So Lord willing, this was edifying. Until the next time, bid everyone a mighty shalom.